Hi, this is Scott from Spectre Gear, and for today's video, we're back with the third installment in our series on mastering the double action trigger on our revolvers. In the first installment, we talked about the importance of fundamental skills. In the second, we talked about the importance of the grip and how that lays the foundation for your ability to operate the trigger. And in this installment, we're going to be talking about sight picture. Now, the sight picture, what we're trying to do here, and I want to give you a fast forward just a little bit and let you know that all of this is going to later be done in dry practice and live practice. You're going to be focusing on these fundamental skills as you dry practice with the trigger, and you're going to be focusing on those fundamental skills initially as you are doing live fire. Now, developing the response to get a proper sight picture as soon as you present the weapon is a good skill to burn into your head. Because while we're going to be using the sight picture and the sight alignment for more of a precision purpose and as a diagnostic tool while we're learning our trigger, developing that reflex to always reference that front sight is going to be something that's going to come into play later when we're talking about combat shooting fundamentals. And the fundamentals are still the same. It's just the sight picture is ever so slightly different. But aside from a situation where a person is literally right on top of you and you're belly to belly and you're presenting a little snub nose and you're popping 5 rounds into their chest cavity from contact distance without ever even referencing the sight, that's a totally different thing. There's no way you could reference the sights even if you wanted to, and even then it would be a bad idea. The whole thing is you get the gun between you and what scares you and operate the gun. Now, if there's any amount of distance between you and what's causing you a problem, you're obviously going to be looking at that problem. So if it's 3 o'clock in the morning at an ATM, you hear footsteps coming up rapidly behind you, you turn around, you see a guy coming at you with a knife. You're going to present that gun and you're going to be looking at the bad guy. And what's going to happen is you're going to bring the gun up between your eye and that bad guy. And as soon as that gun comes up between those 2 points, you're automatically going to reference that front sight. No, you're not going to get a sight picture where you're making sure the sight is even with the top of the notch and equal amount of light on each side. That's ridiculous. What you're going to do, though, is bring the gun up and your eye is going to go to that front sight as your finger is going to the trigger. It's going to take no extra time to acquire that front sight. But in acquiring that front sight, it's going to assure that everything's squared up enough that at a distance of 3 to 5 yards, any rounds you press are going to actually hit the bad guy you intend to hit. Because do keep in mind, we're morally and legally responsible for the terminal resting point of every round of ammunition we fire downrange. And you want to make sure that whatever you fire hits what it needs to hit and not something that doesn't need to be hit, like another person that had nothing to do with this incident. So we don't just produce our gun from the hip and just start fanging rounds downrange, hoping that somehow this bad guy wanders into the cluster of lead that we've sent downrange. That's called spray and pray, and that's a ridiculous tactic to use. I vehemently disagree with that. So that's the whole purpose of starting to burn in this muscle memory, or rather this instinctive reflex, this programmed response, if you will. You're going to start building in that programmed response via dry practice to always be focusing on the front sight. And how this is going to work is this front sight is going to be your diagnostic tool. So aside from being something that aligns the weapon so that the round goes to your intended point that you intend to deliver a bullet, also what this is going to do is be a diagnostic tool to let you know how much the gun is moving while you're cycling the trigger. And that's important. So as you're doing your practice, you've achieved your grip, you have whatever point that you're aiming at via your dry practice, a piece of armor, a brick wall that's going to contain a round if one is actually fired, whatever that is. You want to set up a deliberate target. So you hang a paper target there, put an army man, whatever you want. Put a picture of your ex-wife if you want to. I don't care. But put that up nonetheless so that you have something to aim at. You want to focus at that point that you want the bullet to land on, and then you want to bring the gun up between your eye and that point. And as soon as it comes up, you want to verify your sight picture. You want to look at that point that you want to hit, You want to align the front sight, the rear sight, and you want to focus on that front sight through the rear sight notch. You want to do the stuff where it's even across the top, equal amount of light on each side, but you want to have intent focus on the front sight. Now, as you're practicing your trigger press, if your grip is insufficient or lacking in some way, what will happen is as you begin to cycle the trigger, and in this case I'll take a very light grip on the weapon, so it's just resting my hand at this point. As I cycle the trigger to the rear, I'm going to see that movement that just occurred. So if you watch that front sight, as soon as I start stacking pressure and I'm not gripping much at all, you see how it went to the left and then kind of wobbled a little bit. If I'm watching my front sight, I'm seeing that movement. What I want to do is make that connection via hand-eye coordination so that I want that front sight. My intent is to hold that front sight still. So as I'm applying pressure to the trigger, what will happen naturally is that you will grip down and you will compensate for that movement. So if that movement is to the left, you'll apply more pressure, and then you'll hold it nice and steady as you cycle the trigger. Now remember, you're going to get some movement. You're always going to get a little bit of movement. Our hands are not made out of rock or steel. So yeah, you're going to get a little bit of movement, and that's fine. What you don't want is a lot of movement. But you're going to diagnose all of that movement via focus on the front sight. So that's why that fundamental of sight picture is so important. But also, if you're going to be bothering to do all of the dry practice that you're going to be doing, you might as well burn in a useful reflex for later. Because again, if you have conditioned yourself to, as soon as that gun is presented, you always look at the front sight and then begin operating the weapon. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when you present this weapon between your eye and the bad guy that's threatening you, your eye will automatically focus on that front sight when it comes up, and you'll start pressing that trigger, and you will have much better results. So that's how a target shooting, skills building fundamental technique can also apply as a combat technique as well. So sight picture, very important. And merely as a diagnostic tool, but also burning that in. So with that, I will end this on the presentation here on sight picture, and we'll move on to trigger control and follow through, and that'll kind of wrap up the whole technique, and we'll talk about actually running the trigger and then some things you want to do and don't want to do once that's happened. So I will break at this point. Thank you for watching and or listening. Again, if you're interested in supporting our activities here, please visit us at spectregear.com. And so with that, thank you for watching. This is Scott from Spectre Gear. Have a wonderful day.